This is the second in a series of 5 videos about As I Lay Dying, and my hope is that these videos will spawn ideas for discussion of the novel in class. This video covers pages 65 to 111 of the Vintage International Edition. These chapters have to do mainly with the emotional fallout after Addie's death, and in particular, its impact on Vardaman, who receives a lot of attention in this section of the novel. Also described in these chapters are the family's preparations for the journey to Jefferson to bury Addie. Cash finishes the coffin. The Tolls bring a grief-addled Vardaman back home after he'd run away in the middle of the night. Darl and Jewel return with the wagon after an accident on the road delays them for 3 days. And finally, the boys, mainly Jewel, load Addie on the wagon, and the family begins the difficult journey that will take up most of the rest of the novel. In this section, there are 14 monologues, the same number as last time. There are no women in this group. Neither Cora nor Dewey Dell have monologues. We hear their voices only through the narration of the male characters in this group. More than half the chapters, you will notice, are split between Darl and Vardaman. Toll is the only narrator who is not a member of the Bundren family. But we hear from the eldest son, Cash, for the first time, although most of his narration is focused on the design and construction of the coffin, a point we'll come back to a little later. So we're going to take a closer look now at 5 of these chapters. Again, as I explained in the first video, I've deliberately avoided certain passages in the hope that they will come up in class discussion. I will focus instead on passages that first-time readers may find challenging or that have special significance for situations that will arise later in the novel. So we'll begin with Toll, Vernon Toll, who describes Vardaman's arrival at his house in the middle of the night. He's soaking wet from the storm and distraught with grief. It's somewhat comical the way Vardaman shows up at the front door, but also a little spooky the way Vernon describes it. As they get ready to take the boy back home, Vernon makes some interesting comments about his wife Cora. He might even detect a little annoyance with her, some comments about marriage, and most notably, comments about Darl. Now and then a fellow gets to thinking about all the sorrow and afflictions in this world, how it's liable to strike anywhere, like lightning. I reckon it does take a powerful trust in the Lord to guard a fellow, though sometimes I think that Cora's a mite overcautious, like she was trying to crowd the other folks away and get in closer than anybody else. But then, when something like this happens, I reckon she is right, and you got to keep after it, and I reckon I am blessed in having a wife that ever strives for sanctity and well-doing like she says I am. Now and then a fellow gets to thinking about it. Not often, though, which is a good thing, for the Lord aimed for him to do and not to spend too much time thinking, because his brain, it's like a piece of machinery. It won't stand a whole lot of racking. It's best when it all runs along the same, doing the day's work and not no one part used no more than needful. I have said and I say again, that's ever-living thing the matter with Darl. He just thinks by himself too much. Cora's right when she says all he needs is a wife to straighten him out. And when I think about that, I think that if nothing but being married will help a man, he's darn nigh hopeless. But I reckon Cora's right when she says the reason the Lord had to create women is because man don't know his own good when he sees it. This is one of several similar comments about Darl coming from different characters throughout the novel that indicate a general awareness that he's different from everyone else. There's something abnormal, something wrong with him. The clear implication here is that Darl is like a piece of malfunctioning machinery, and that the cause of the breakdown is something internal, something inside his head. In this way, one might say he's similar to his older brother Cash, whom Darl himself describes as being like a machine laboring over Addie's coffin. And indeed, when Cash's own thoughts are finally revealed to us in this section of the novel, we see that he thinks like a machine, and that what he thinks about to the exclusion of most everything else, is the design and construction of his mother's coffin. His precious tools are a kind of extension of his body, and that's a theme that will become more explicit in the next section of the novel. If Darl's disintegration is internal, that is mental and emotional, Cash's breakdown will be physical. In the course of the novel, he will endure more physical suffering than anyone else. Cash's machine-like traits become apparent in Darl's description of his ceaseless, almost frenzied effort to complete Addie's coffin on the night of her death. This description comes in one of his longer monologues. It starts on page 75 and goes through page 81. Pa goes to the house. The rain rushes suddenly down, without thunder, without warning of any sort. He is swept onto the porch upon the edge of it, and in an instant Cash is wet to the skin. Yet the motion of the saw has not faltered, as though it and the arm functioned in a tranquil conviction that rain was an illusion of the mind. Then he puts down the saw and goes and crouches above the lantern, shielding it with his body, his back shaped lean and scrawny by his wet shirt, as though he had been abruptly turned wrong side out, shirt and all. Pa returns. He's wearing Jewel's raincoat and carrying Dewey Dells. Squatting over the lantern, Cash reaches back and picks up 4 sticks and drives them into the earth and takes Dewey Dells' raincoat from Pa and spreads it over the sticks, forming a roof above the lantern. Pa watches him. "I don't know what you'll do," he says. "Darl taking his coat with him." "Get wet," Cash says. He takes up the saw again. Again it moves up and down, in and out of that unhurried imperviousness as a piston moves in the oil. Soaked, scrawny, tireless, with the lean, light body of a boy or an old man. Darl's detailed narration of events at the Bundren farm while he's still on the road with Jewel is another example of bilocation in the novel, much the same as his earlier account of Addie's death, which we looked at last time. His monologue concludes with one of the novel's most elliptical and puzzling passages up to this point. On one level, it perfectly illustrates what Vernon Tull said before about Darl, about his tendency to overthink and isolate himself from others. But Darl is the novel's most verbal narrator. Many of the key events are told from his point of view, and Faulkner obviously wants us to read him closely. The significance of this passage is what Darl says, albeit obliquely, about the connection between identity and consciousness, between our interior selves and the outside world. A theme that will resurface in the monologues of other characters and in Darl's conversations with them. In a strange room, you must empty yourself for sleep. And before you are emptied for sleep, what are you? And when you are emptied for sleep, you are not. And when you are filled with sleep, you never were. I don't know what I am. I don't know if I am or not. Jewel knows he is, because he does not know that he does not know whether he is or not. He cannot empty himself for sleep because he is not what he is, and he is what he is not. Beyond the unlamped wall, I can hear the rain shaping the wagon that is ours, the load that is no longer theirs that felled and sawed it, nor yet theirs that bought it, and which is not ours either, lie on our wagon though it does. Since only the wind and the rain shape it only to Jewel and me that are not asleep. And since sleep is not, and rain and wind are was, it is not. Yet the wagon is, because when the wagon was, Addie Bundren will not be. And Jewel is, so Addie Bundren must be. And then I must be, or I could not empty myself for sleep in a strange room. And so if I am not emptied yet, I am is. How often have I lain beneath rain on a strange roof, thinking of home? I included this last sentence, it's the very end of the monologue actually, because it offers another glimpse. It's just a glimpse, and a rare glimpse, into Darl's mysterious past. What strange roofs is he talking about here? And if he wasn't at home on the Bundren farm for extended periods of time, where was he? Where has he been? But in the longer passage that precedes it, Darrell talks about sleep as something akin to death. When you're asleep, he says, it's like you never were. You're aware neither of yourself nor your surroundings. And for Darrell, that kind of oblivion holds the promise of relief, a release from the burden of a tormented consciousness. To be filled with sleep is something he apparently desires, but it will elude him so long as he persists in trying to understand who he is. I don't know what I am, he says, which is the problem that keeps him awake. If I'm not emptied yet, I am is. He wants to be empty, to be a nonentity, like the immobile wagon sitting outside, alone in the dark and wet. But the elements of his life, his parents, his siblings, his mysterious past, like the wind and rain, keep him from finding that peace. One reason I selected this passage is because it anticipates his mother Addie's insomniac musings on similar problems later in the novel, but not in this section. And it also anticipates Darrell's entanglement with the verb to be, which re-echoes in Vardaman's narrative later in this section. We're going to look now at two of Vardaman's monologues back to back, though they're not presented that way in the novel. The first occurs on pages 65 to 67. Vardaman here is also struggling with problems of identification. He's trying to understand what happened to his mother when she died. And working through this problem, he draws on, just because he's a child, he draws on a more limited store of experiences than the older Bundrens, including a traumatic memory from his infancy. But most of what he knows about death has come from his observation of all the animals hunted, cooked, and eaten by the family, and of course from his own participation in these everyday rituals when he killed and cleaned a fish on the day of his mother's death. And you might remember how excited he was to show the fish to his mother when he brought it home. It was not her. I was there looking. I saw. I thought it was her, but it was not. It was not my mother. She went away when the other one laid down on her bed and drew the quilt up. She went away. Did she go as far as town? She went further than town. Did all those rabbits and possums go further than town? God made the rabbits and possums. He made the train. Why must he make a different place for them to go if she is just like the rabbit? And so if Cash nails the box up, she's not a rabbit. And so she's not a rabbit, And so if Cash nails the box up, she is not a rabbit. And so if she's not a rabbit, I couldn't breathe in the crib, and Cash is going to nail it up. And so if she lets him, it is not her. I know. I was there. I saw when it did not be her. I saw. They think it is, and Cash is going to nail it up. It was not her because it was laying right yonder in the dirt, and now it's all chopped up. I chopped it up. It's laying in the kitchen in the bleeding pan, waiting to be cooked and et. Then it wasn't, and she was, and now it is, and she wasn't. And tomorrow will be cooked and et, and she will be him and Paul and Cash and Dewey Dell, and there won't be anything in the box, and so she can breathe. It was laying right yonder on the ground. Vardaman believes Addie's corpse can't really be his mother, and even if it were, what a terrible thing it is, from a child's perspective, to close her up inside a tight wooden box where she can't breathe. Later, he will use Cash's braids to drill holes through the lid, mutilating her face in the process. But if the corpse is not his mother, then where did she go? His solution to the problem, and it's a disturbing one, rather primitive actually, is to turn her into food, like the rabbits and possums that are staples of the Bundren diet. It is at this point that he identifies her with the fish. Before he caught the fish, it wasn't, and she was, but now the fish is laying in the bleeding pan, and she wasn't. So his catching of the fish, to his mind, coincides with Addie's passing, and for the rest of the novel, he will fill the breach left by that loss with the fish, which develops into an animal symbol, one of many such symbols in the novel representing Vardaman's grief. These ideas are picked up again later in Vardaman's next monologue on pages 100 to 102, when the family finally sets off for Jefferson. "You leave that horse here," Pa says. Jules stops and looks at Pa. Jules' eyes look like marbles. "You leave that horse here," Pa says. "We'll all go in the wagon with Ma like she wanted." "But my mother is a fish. Vernon's seen it. He was there." "Jules' mother is a horse," Darrell said. "Then mine can be a fish, can it, Darrell?" I said. "Jules is my brother." "Then mine will have to be a horse too," I said. "Why?" Darrell said. "If Pa is your pa, why does your ma have to be a horse just because Jules is?" "Why does it?" I said. "Why does it, Darrell?" "Darrell is my brother." "Then what is your ma, Darrell?" I said. "I haven't got e'er one," Darrell said, "because if I had one, it is was. And if it is was, it can't be is, can it?" "No," I said. "Then I am not," Darrell said. "Am I?" "No," I said. "I am. Darrell is my brother." "But you are, Darrell," I said. "I know it," Darrell said. "That's why I am not is. Are is too many for one woman to foal." One of the challenges of this exchange is that Vardaman is describing two separate events simultaneously. There is the present situation of the family gathering to begin their journey to Jefferson, and Anse's frustration with Jewel and the others for disrespecting their dead mother, or what Anse perceives to be disrespect. But there's also Vardaman's talk with Darrell, which is recounted in the past tense, though there's little indication of when or where that conversation took place. We can't even be sure they actually spoke to each other. This conversation might just as well have been another telepathic exchange, like the conversation between Darrell and Dewey Dell we looked at last time. Once again, in this passage, Vardaman articulates the wishful fantasy that his mother is a fish, which is disrupted by Darrell's comment that Jules' mother is a horse. What Darrell means, of course, is that Jules' horse is more important to him than family, that his identity is more closely tied to this animal than to his relationship with his own mother. And this is an assumption that will get tested later in the novel. But as we saw earlier, Addie's death is the source of Vardaman's uncertainties, which he attempts to resolve by identifying her with the fish. Now he's told that she's something different to his brother Jewel, and that difference raises doubts, not only about his mother, but also about his place in the family. How can he and Jewel be brothers with two different mothers? His response is to fall back on childlike declarative statements. Jewel is my brother, Darrell is my brother, and most famously, my mother is a fish. Such answers don't come so easily to Darrell, who tells Vardaman here that he no longer has a mother at all, animal or otherwise. And if he no longer has a mother, Darrell not only questions who he is, but whether he can even be. Vardaman tries reassuring him. "But you are, Darrell," he says. And with an ironic twist on the second-person verb form of to be, Darrell implies that the maternal bond is the proof and anchor of one's identity. Addie's death has created a vacancy, a void. And having nothing to fill that void, no fish, no horse, or as Cora Tull might add, no wife, Darrell feels lost. No longer a whole person, but a kind of fragmented, aggregate being defined only in relation to others, like the earlier image of the stationary wagon shaped only by the wind and rain. So the last passage we're going to look at now comes from Ance's monologue, which begins on page 105 and ends on page 106. What Darl says about Jules' horrors, that it is his mother, that it's the essence of Jules' identity, seems to receive confirmation as soon as the family leaves for Jefferson. Jewel refuses to ride on the wagon with the rest of the family, choosing instead to ride alone on horseback, which sends Darl into a hysterical fit of laughter. I told him not to bring that horse out of respect for his dead ma, because it wouldn't look right, him prancing along on a darn circus animal, and her wanting us all to be in the wagon with her that sprung from her flesh and blood. But we hadn't no more than passed Toll's Lane when Darl begun to laugh, sitting back there on the plank seat with Cash, with his dead ma laying in her coffin at his feet, laughing. How many times I told him it's doing such things as that makes folks talk about him, I don't know. I says I got some regard for what folks says about my flesh and blood, even if you haven't, even if I have raised such a darn passel of boys. And when you fixes it so folks can say such about you, it's a reflection on your ma, I says, not me. I am a man and I can stand it. It's on your women folks, your ma and sister, that you should care for. And I turned and looked back at him, and him setting there, laughing. I don't expect you to have no respect for me, I says, but with your own ma not cold in her coffin yet. Yonder, Cash says, jerking his head toward the lane. The horse is still a right smart piece away, coming up at a good pace, but I don't have to be told who it is. I just looked back at Darl, sitting there laughing. It's hard for the reader not to see the humor in this scene. Ance is, of course, angry at Jewel for refusing to ride with the rest of the family, just as he's angry at Cash for bringing along his tools to drop off at Toll's farm for some work he's been hired to do when they get back, and angry too at Dewey-Dell for packing Cora's cakes to try and sell in Jefferson, which is really just cover for her to seek out an abortion. But clearly here, he is most deeply troubled by Darl, and once again hints at suspicions and dark rumors concerning Darl's mental condition. And that concludes the second video on As I Lay Dying. Next time we'll be looking at pages 112 to 165, and eventful chapters they are.